Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the 8th and final Autumn 2018 Analogues update from GWV.com. So we've done 7 Autumn Analogues updates so far, as well as 2 seasonal model roundups for the autumn. We've come to the end of the updates now, and it is time to give you your final Analogues update. And then next week, a week today, Sunday 26th of August, we will release the GWV.com Autumn 2018 forecast. So we're pretty much at the end of the countdown to autumn now. So just say that it's going to be a busy day at the website. There are more updates coming up through the course of the day. We've got GWV's Sunny Roundup, as always, coming up just after lunch. And then late this afternoon, probably around 4 or 5 o'clock, we will release the latest update for the ECMWF and Metro France seasonal models. So that will be coming up with you this evening. So a big weekend of updates continues at GWV's. But this is your 8th Autumn 2018 Analogues update. So, been a bit mixed up through this season of updates because we've had problems at the reanalysis website. Those problems have been ironed out, so we're going to actually go back now to July. We did analogues for autumns, but followed very hot Julys for the 6th update. I mean, for last week's 7th update, we actually went away from July data, and we had a look at ENSO. We're going back to July data for this update, become apparent why as we go along. And we're going to have a look at autumns that follow the top 20 driest Julys going back to 1766. We're going to use the England and Wales precipitation data set, taking us right way back into the 1700s, and we're going to get reanalysis all the way back to 1850 for this one. So I'll talk you through reanalysis in a moment. Just say you're going to be quite a long video, so you can't watch it all in one go. Don't worry, it will be placed on the autumn updates podcast page later on today. There'll be a written summary that goes with it as well, just going over everything that we discussed in the video. Big thank you to our Analogues guru, James Ackrill, again for getting all of the analogues and all of the data together. As I always say, I can't do these analogues updates without James, because I just don't have the time to get all of the information together. So a big thank you to James as ever. Really, all of the information you see here has come from James. I'm just presenting it. So again, big thank you to GWV's Analogues guru, Mr. James Ackrill. And with that said, I think we better get on with our 8th and final Autumn 2018 Analogues update. So this is the rainfall amount for July 2018. So it was a very dry month, particularly for England and Wales. A lot of regional variation, but we do see that parts of the Midlands, Central, Southern, Southeastern Britain had less than 25 millimetres, so between 0 and 25 millimetres in some of those southeastern parts of the country. In terms of the data sets to 1910, it was the 15th driest July on record. But again, that does mask lots of regional variation, because some places barely recorded any measurable rain throughout the whole of the month, whereas other places have thunderstorms and had real deluges in just an hour or two. So it's that funny sort of summer month that we get in the UK sometimes, where a few miles difference in terms of regional makes a big difference in terms of the regional variation. But we can say that England and Wales in particular did have a dry or a very dry July. And so we're going to have a look at the top 20 driest Julys going back to 1766, going back through the England and Wales precipitation series. So coming out at number 20, we have July 1990. July 1990 is at number 20 in the England and Wales precipitation series. This is how the autumn of 1990 looks. Quite an unsettled autumn. It has above average heights out to the northwest of the country and below average heights to kind of like the south and southeast. And so we do something a bit like that with the flow and with the jet stream. So it's a rather coolish autumn, late on anyway. Early on it's quite mild, has a fairly warm October, so there's a lot of instrument variation. But overall it does turn quite cool later on, and it is a bit on the unsettled side as well in the autumn of 1990. Number 19, in terms of the driest Julys, we find that we have 1952, which has below average heights over and to the east of the UK and above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic through this autumn. And so we're pulling down this northerly wind. It's a cold autumn in 1952, very cold autumn in 1952. Number 18 comes out as 1979. This is how the autumn of 1979 looks. Of quite a mild autumn. This time we have above average heights over to the south of the country, below average heights up to the north. Got a flat westerly jet stream. So it's a fairly quiet, fairly benign and mild autumn. Following the 18th driest July back to 1766. At number 17, we've got 1906. So July 1906 is the 17th driest July on record, and then in terms of the autumn, this is how it looks during the autumn of 1906, with above average heights to the east and the northeast. So quite an easterly autumn, this one. Again, probably a lot of quiet weather. I'm not sure about the temperatures. It did start off very, very hot at the beginning of September 1906, but I think overall this is probably quite a cool autumn, actually. Fairly dry, and yes, it has those easterly winds too. Number 16, in terms of the driest Julys on record, is 1982, and the autumn of 1982 is very unsettled, with below average heights through the country and bringing in this strong westerly jet stream. So it's a very Atlantic-driven autumn, to say the least. A lot of wet weather in the autumn of 1982. Number 15 for the driest Julys on record is 1913. This is how the autumn of 1913 looks. Again, quite an unsettled autumn with below average heights just to the west of the country. A little bit of an Atlantic onslaught. It's not cold though. We're bringing up sort of southerly to southwesterly winds. So a lot of mild weather is in there, but also pretty wet as well. Number 14 for the top 20 driest Julys is 1976. Yes, the big one is there at number 14, and this been cropping up a lot through our Analogues updates this year. It's a very unsettled autumn indeed. In 1976, we break the drought. We have that big area of low pressure to the south and to the west of the country, bringing in the flow and the jet like that. It's just a really, really unsettled autumn in 1976, with copious amounts of rain breaking the long drought that started in 1974 and ended, or culminated, in the summer of 1976. Number 13 for the driest Julys on record is 1921, and this is how the autumn of 1921 looks. A very quiet autumn, above average heights centred over the top of the country. Below average heights are up to the north. There would have been a lot of very quiet and dry weather through the autumn of 1921. And then we come to number 12 in terms of the driest Julys on record, which is 1853. And this is the reason we had to push this update to this week, because the reanalysis site that we get all of these reanalysis charts from was playing up, so it was only able to get you reanalysis from 1900 onwards. It wasn't able to go back into the 1800s. So you will see as we go along with this, there are actually quite a few years that are showing up in the 1800s for the driest Julys on record. So at number 12 for the top 20 driest Julys, we've got 1853. The autumn of 1853 looks very, very unsettled, with below average heights again over and to the west of the UK, above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic, and also over across eastern parts of Europe. So the flow and the jet is doing something rather like that. It looks like we're on the cold side of the jet, but actually this will be quite a mild autumn, I think, because we'll be bringing the air up from a southerly to southwesterly direction. But the main thing is the below average heights bringing, I would have thought, quite a lot of wet weather. we are into the top 10. So at number 10, we've got 1935 showing up, and this is how the autumn of 1935 looks, with below average heights centred almost over the top of the UK. And above average heights are in the middle of the Atlantic and also over to the eastern part of Europe. So again, another very unsettled autumn is showing up there. You would expect a lot of rain to be pushed in with that trough of below average heights, but looks like it's almost stationary over the top of the country. And at that point, I'm just going to pause the video there. So I've been talking for 10 minutes. I'm going to hit the pause button, and we will meet back and go through the rest of the top 20 driest Julys. We're into the top 10. And we'll also have some more data that combines the dry Julys with the hot Julys. So come back in about 2 minutes' time, and we will resume your 8th Autumn 2018 Analogues update. Okay, and we're back. Just going to check to make sure that we're recording. Yes, we are. So there was a little bit of an error there. I'm not sure if you noticed what happened, but we went from number 12 in terms of the driest Julys on record, or top 20 driest Julys on record. Went from number 12 to number 10. Missed out number 11. I didn't upload number 11. So I've gone back into the files and got up number 11. And this is it. This is the autumn that follows the 11th driest July in terms of the top 20 driest Julys on record in terms of the England and Wales series. And it's 1984, so let's carry on with your Analogues update. And this is how the autumn of 1984 shaped up, which followed the 11th driest July on record. And this one, again, very unsettled autumn with below average heights just to west of the UK. It's a very mild autumn, but it's also a really wet autumn in 1984. We're into the top 10 with 1935, so just a quick reminder of that. We saw that for a pause of video due to the mistake, but here we are with autumn of 1935. It's a very unsettled autumn with low pressure over top of the country. Right, let's carry on. And number 9 in terms of the top 20 driest Julys is 1864. So I've got another one that goes back into the 1800s. This is the reason we had to postpone this update till this week, till the reanalysis website started working again. So the autumn of 1864, following the 9th driest July on record, looks like that, with below average heights to the south of the UK and a bit of a blocking seal up to the north. This is the first one that possibly implies some colder weather. This does imply that we might have had a colder autumn here, with the below average heights to the south, the above average heights are blocking to the north, possibly pushing cold air down into that trough in the autumn of 1864. Number 8 in terms of the driest Julys on record is 1999. This is how the autumn of 1999 looks, with below average heights to the west and a strong ridge of above average heights to the east and the northeast. This is a very mild autumn in 1999. It has a really warm September, and then as we go into October and November, it stays pretty mild really through the autumn of 1999. Number 7 for the driest Julys on record is 1955. The autumn of 1955 looks like that, with above average heights over and to the northwest of the country, and again bring down these east to northeasterly winds. So it's a very dry autumn, it's a quiet autumn, it's a long hot summer. The dry spell carries on into the autumn. The only difference is that it gradually starts to become a little bit cooler. But again, the main emphasis for that autumn is on very dry conditions indeed. Another one from the 1800s, number 6 in terms of the driest Julys on record, is 1898. The autumn of 1898 looks like that, with again below average heights to the west, to the southwest of the country, but this big ridge to the east. This looks like a dry and a warm autumn, bringing the air up from a southerly direction. So that's probably an Indian summer type autumn in 1898. And another one from the 1800s, into the top 5 now, the top 5 driest Julys on record. Number 5 comes out at 1885. And this one, this autumn, following that 5th driest July on record, is exceptionally unsettled, with this deep area of below average heights over the top of the UK. Would have been a very wet autumn indeed. There is a little bit of a blocking signal, so possibly some colder weather at times. But I think, again, the emphasis really is on the below average heights, bringing a very unsettled, potentially very wet autumn. Number 4 for the driest Julys on record is 1977, and this is how the, perhaps a little bit surprisingly, but it would be 1977, because we don't really remember that summer as being particularly memorable, but obviously it did have a very dry, if not particularly warm, July. So the autumn of 1977, the autumn I was born in, incidentally happens to have low pressure to the north and above average pressure weekly to the south. The flow on the jet is like that. So this is another pretty quiet autumn. There's a lot of dry, quiet weather through the autumn of 1977, and it is quite a mild autumn as well. We're into the top 3. So the 3rd driest July on record is 1869. And this is how the autumn of 1869 looks. And this one is definitively cold, I think. So we've got this big area of below average heights to our east. We've got this big area of above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic and going up to Greenland. And so that leaves us pulling down this cold northerly wind. That is the first chart, really, that you could look and say definitively cold through the autumn of 1869. But we're not done there, because then we go on to the 2nd driest July on record, which is 1868. And this is how the autumn of 1868 looks. This is even more definitively cold, with a strong blocking signal around Greenland. And then we get these below average heights to the east and south of the country. And so we pull down these cold north to northeasterly winds. The winter of 1868-1869 is the warmest winter on record. Hasn't been beaten even through these modern sort of mild winters that we've had over the past 20 or 30 years. 1868-1869 remains the warmest winter on record, but the autumn of 1868, preceding that exceptionally mild winter, was actually really quite cold. And then number 1, the driest July on record in terms of the England and Wales series is 1911, the long hot summer just before the beginning of the First World War. Of 1911, we find that the autumn following that very hot summer is actually really unsettled. The autumn of 1911 places that deep area of below average heights over the UK. It's a little bit of a blocking signal, not much around Iceland. The main thing with that autumn is that it's quite a warm, mild autumn, but it's very, very unsettled, with lots of heavy rain following the long hot summer. So let's start bringing it all together then, and we'll combine all of those top 20 driest Julys on record and have a look at September's for all of those years. And for September, it is an unsettled signal with below average heights over the UK and also going to Scandinavia. Not a particularly cold signal though. There's no real northern blocking. There is blocking on the other side of the pole over here, over towards the Pacific side of the pole, but for us there's no real blocking around Greenland or Iceland, so these are mild but wet Septembers with west or southwesterly winds quite typically. For October, that's how all of these years look when you combine the Octobers with below average heights over to the south of the UK, and somewhat of a blocking signal to the north. There is a bit of a trough within the 500 millibar flow, so there is a greater potential for those Octobers to be cooler. There is high pressure to the north and to the northwest. Overall, though, still quite unsettled signals for October. And then for November, again, unsettled signals, but not particularly cold. You'll see that we have below average heights over and to the south of the UK, but there's no real blocking to force cold air down into that trough. And so this is just a signal for an unsettled autumn, really, following these top 20 driest Julys. They don't look overly cold. Very few of these years are producing really cold autumns. There are a few that are in there, but not all that many of them. And then in terms of the autumns altogether, so all of these years, we put all of the autumn months for all of these years together. This is how the autumns look that follow the top 20 driest Julys on record. And we find that, again, it's an unsettled signal with below average heights over to the south of the country. There's a little bit of a blocking signal to the northwest. That's primarily due to what's happening in the Octobers, I think. It's a very weak signal. I don't think we can say there's a particularly cold signal at all following these top 20 driest Julys. The main issue, as I keep saying, is that they are unsettled. Now let's take out all of the years from the 1800s, from the Victorian era, and just combine all of the years that we have from 1900 onwards. So this is how the Septembers look if you take out the Victorian years and just have a look at all years combined from 1900 onwards. It's still an unsettled signal for September, but nowhere near as much. The below average heights are not as intense as we saw when we had the years from the 1800s in the mix. So yes, it is still an unsettled signal, but there's a greater chance that we might do something a little bit drier when we take out those earlier years and just look at the reanalysis from 1900 onwards. However, October actually comes out more unsettled, so we get below average heights and very deep area below average heights just to the west of the UK, above average heights to the northeast. And so what we gain in September, potentially having a greater chance of being a bit drier, we lose in the Octobers, and the Octobers do look very unsettled. Also mild, there's no signal for cold weather in either the Septembers or the Octobers here. They just look wet, wet in October, potentially very wet, and a little bit changeable in the Septembers. And then in terms of November, when we combine all of these years from 1900 onwards, again the Novembers looking very unsettled. No cold signal, you'll notice, no real blocking anywhere around Greenland or the pole to force cold air down into this trough. So these are just wet and relatively mild Novembers on average. Yes, there would be some colder Novembers in there, I'm sure of that, but they are a minority option. Most of these Novembers are not cold, they are just unsettled, wet Novembers. And then in terms of combining all of the months and bring the autumns together, we see that we have this signal with, again, below average heights close to the UK. Yes, we've got this deep area of below average heights very, very close to the UK when we combine all of those autumns together. That says November, but that should actually say autumn. So, again, it's a similar signal for the all years combined and for the all years combined from 1900s. They're both going for unsettled autumn conditions. Both data sets don't really pinpoint a sign of particularly cold conditions as well, you have to say. They just look really quite wet indeed. And now, finally, we're just going to put together the dry Julys with the very warm Julys. They're what we looked at, of course, in the 6th Analogues update. And this is a table that James has very kindly created for us. So I just taught you through this very quickly. We've got our reanalysis years just here. So we've got 1825 up there and 1817 down there, and all of the other years that we've looked both for dry Julys and for hot Julys over these two updates. So we've got the July England and Wales precipitation numbers just there for these Julys, followed by the September, October and November CETs. And then, of course, we've got July years again just here, and we go through into the precipitation for these autumn months, September, October and November as well. So put it all together, we can see that 1911, so we've got 1911, we've got 1868, we've got 1921, got 1976, we've got, let me just look at the screen, 1995, we've also got 2006, 1983, and also I think they're 1878 and 2006 coming out as our hot and dry July analogue. So let's bring those together and have a look at the Septembers. This is how the hot and dry Julys show up in terms of these years. Again, we've got 1868, 1911, 1921, 1976, 1983, 1989, 1995 and 2006. And we can see that for the Septembers, we've got the above average heights to the north, and we've got below average heights to the southwest. So we do have a bit of a blocking signal in the Septembers when we put these dry and hot Julys together and look at the Septembers that follow them. Looks like they're quite unsettled, bit of a blocking signal. So actually the Septembers can be quite cool and can be quite wet, especially so for southern and western parts of the country. The Octobers, though, present a very different scenario. This is how the Octobers look for these hot and dry July analogues, and we have again the above average heights very close to the UK this time, so it's a much drier signal for the Octobers with the high pressure centered over and a little bit to the south and the east of the country. That leaves the jet stream up here, so we're on the warm side of the jet stream, so generally quite dry and warm for the Octobers, following the cooler and wetter signal for the Septembers. And then that's how the Novembers look, and that's very interesting because we find that for the Novembers, this is a complete flip when we combine the hot Julys with the dry Julys. This is a complete flip of what we just looked at in terms of just wet, dry Julys on their own. So the temperature side of this makes a very big difference, because for November we do get a cold signal, we do get a blocking signal centered around Greenland and Iceland, with below average heights down there, and also to our east where you can't see the colour all that well. We could be pulling in quite cold east or northeasterly winds with those November. So all of a sudden, when we combine hot Julys with dry Julys, all of a sudden we do begin to see a much colder potential appearing within the analogues, especially so for November, but also to some degree for September as well. In terms of the autumns combining all of these autumns following both hot and dry Julys, we come out with this. Above average heights are to the north, below average heights to the southwest. So again, it looks like it is a rather cold signal. We could be pulling down the air from a north or northeasterly direction with these autumns that follow hot and dry Julys. Bear in mind, a lot of that is down to what's happening in September and November. The blocking signal isn't there for October, and actually October does look like a relatively dry and quiet signal. So, quite an interesting note to finish on, and a little bit of a flip on everything else that we've looked. It just goes to show you how, if you take two elements together, you can come out with a rather different idea compared to if you're just looking at one element. For example, dry Julys on their own. So putting the hot and dry Julys together does flip things much more towards the colder side of things. Right, so that is your 8th and final Autumn 2018 Analogues update in the can, and I hope you found it interesting and informative. There's nothing more we can do now, really, other than bring you the autumn forecast itself. So that's going to be released in a week's time. Hopefully we'll be able to combine a little bit, or be able to bring in a little bit more information for August into that, but we really are pushing it whether we're going to be able to do that. But we are hoping to be able to bring you a little bit of Analogues information for August at the beginning of the autumn forecast. But basically next week we are combining the Analogues with the long range seasonal models, and you will be able to see the GWV.com autumn 2018 forecast here at website next week. And by the way, the third and final seasonal model roundup for the autumn will be on Saturday, the day before we release the autumn forecast. Right, so this video will be placed on the autumn updates and forecast page, and there'll be a written summary just going over everything that we discussed in the video. That will probably place this evening, but I may actually delay that till tomorrow morning. I'll just see, because I've got the GWV City roundup to do, and I've also got to do the seasonal model roundup with the ECMWF and Meteo France seasonal models. I've got to write that report up as well. So I may be pushing it to get the written summary for this update up to the autumn updates and forecast page this evening. I will try and do it, but if I can't, it'll be tomorrow. And at 31 minutes, that's all for now. And thanks for watching. Come back next week for the autumn forecast.